Guys, I'm in Paris to put the iPhone 16 Pro Max, the Samsung S24 Ultra, and the Pixel 9 Pro XL head to head for the ultimate camera comparison. So stick around till the end to see which phone takes the crown for the best smartphone camera in the world. Okay, so one of the best ways to really test these phones is in portrait mode. All we did was set them to their default portrait settings, and out the box, this is what I got. Straight away, you can see a few differences. Pixel has a bit of a blue tinge, Samsung not too bad at all, and iPhone for me was just the most balanced and had the best skin tone. Then I did a bit of a hair flick test for the edge detection. Pixel struggled a bit with the edges and was super soft, but Samsung and iPhone were neck and neck. But this is where it got interesting. Pixel did not do bad, but it actually had a foreground blur. Samsung had a whole chunk of building that did not blur, and iPhone's was pretty perfect. Then this is where I tested the maximum amount of blur. And again, Samsung and iPhones were almost identical, and Pixel just had a blue tinge. Also something to note, the Pixel can only do 1.5 and 2 times zoom. It cannot do 5 like the other two can. For this test, I turned all the phones to max blur, except this time I was the subject. They all took such good shots. The iPhone seems like it was taken with a digital camera. Samsung just doesn't have as much blur, and again, the Pixel is limited without having that 5 times zoom. But here's a little test for you guys. Let me know in the comments which one you like the most without knowing which phone took which. And don't worry, I will reveal the results at the end. Okay, so for me, it's neck and neck between Samsung and iPhone. But I do think iPhone just has slightly better edge detection, so I'm gonna give it the point. Okay, now taking photos at night has always been hard for smartphones, but man was I impressed with these. Straight away, the first thing I noticed was the lens flare on the iPhone and Pixel. And when you take a closer look, Samsung just managed to capture way more detail. However, when there's no lens flare like this one, it was just so hard to tear them apart because they all just looked so good. I also wanted to test out their zoom at night just to push them to their max. And this is where I felt like Samsung overprocessed the image. iPhone's was very contrasty, but Pixel did a great job. This was even more interesting to me because it is just so hard to tell these ones apart. But where they did stand apart was in the night video test. And this is where, in my opinion, every phone failed. They looked totally different to each other. The iPhone's coloring made it look like a giant Cheeto. The Samsung was a bit noisy, but did have the best color, and Pixel was just super noisy. So even though they all had their different ups and downs, I would still personally go with Samsung for night photos just because it consistently delivered and it doesn't have those annoying lens flares. So it gets the point. Okay, now I'm about to go and take a selfie with the Mona Lisa. Let's see if I even can. As you can see, it was pure madness in there, but I did manage to catch a selfie with the Mona Lisa, and here were the results. Instantly, I did not like the skin tone on the Samsung. It just looked overexposed. Pixel's was not bad, it just felt a bit over-sharpened, and Lisa was a bit dark in the back there. iPhone, however, looked the most natural, and also my skin tone was balanced. So that was absolutely crazy, but looking at these, I would say if I had to pick one, I'm definitely leaning towards the iPhone. Samsung again just completely missed it on the skin tone, and so did iPhone a bit, but Pixel nailed it, and it's also slightly wider with its selfies. Then for low light selfies, I think we're seeing a pattern here with Samsung. The color was off, iPhone's was great but slightly blurry, and Pixel's was sharp with great color. As for selfie video, the iPhone definitely sounds the best, and I do like its look. The Samsung is super shaky, and the audio is okay. Pixel, I also like the look, but the sound is kind of in between the two. Not as good as the iPhone, but definitely better than the Samsung. Okay, now this was really close between the iPhone and the Pixel, but I'm gonna give iPhone the points because its video and sound quality in selfie mode was just so good. Okay, for zoom, why don't we take a pic, but from up there? Now, I'm not gonna lie, this was pretty scary. Whoa, this is high. But I mean, it felt like the perfect spot to do the zoom test, and here's what we got. Straight away, you can see Pixel's is a bit brighter and Samsung is a bit more saturated with its colors. And the more you zoom in, iPhone just falls apart. And while yes, you can zoom in more with the Samsung to 100 times, it just looks so processed. Here are some more zoom pics I took from the same location, and Samsung's processing definitely over sharpens, so it gives you this illusion that there's more detail when actually it's just a ton of sharpening. But when you look at Pixel zoomed shots, they almost seem optical. It's got this natural softness to it as well as great lighting. But now let's take a pic of this, but from down there. I mean, this is the ultimate camera comparison. And shooting from the ground up did change some things. So iPhone, the pictures were so dark. I mean, it did a really bad job. And of course the Samsung performed well, but the Pixel was just as good, if not better. I mean, just about a year ago, the Samsung was king of zoom. The iPhone and Pixel couldn't even compete, but now... So to really test it out, I did a zoom video. iPhone surprised me with just how smoothly it zoomed in. The Samsung did have a bit of shake, but look at the detail on that Pixel. Wow. So it's interesting how everyone thinks Samsung has the better zoom, but for me, the pics were just over-processed and over-sharpened, and when you take a closer look, Pixels were just better. Okay, so last year, as expected, the iPhone won Pro Video. But let's see if this year, the Samsung and Pixel stepped up their game. So for this test, I shot in HDR on all the phones to see which one had the best detail and colors. And as you can see, they all capture some amazing detail. Like, it's actually just so impressive. But Samsung did have a bit of a light shifting thing happening, and iPhone had a slightly more magenta hue, but that really is nitpicking. So then we tested out color with the brightest umbrella I could find. And here, the iPhone and Pixel just look identical to one another, but Samsung's came out very dark, and even though you can bring up the details and shadows, these were the results without any touch-ups. I tested then the same shot, but with a wider lens, and here if you look at the pavement, I think you can see more of that magenta hue on iPhone I'm talking about, and Samsung's was just a bit darker than I'd like. Let's also not forget the iPhone can shoot in log. However, it is really not easy processing the iPhone's log footage. Pixels was seemingly the easiest, and Samsung did an amazing job despite not being in log. So for Pro Video, this one was interesting because after all the processing of the HDR footage and the log footage, all that jazz, Pixel was surprisingly the easiest to deal with, and as you can see, its video was amazing. But what about Pro Photos? Okay, now this has got to be the best place to do a Pro RAW zoom test. So I set every phone to their RAW mode and went from ultra wide all the way up to 20 times zoom. Again, you would think that Samsung would win the zoom test, or maybe even the Pixel, but without a doubt, the best Mona Lisa pick was the iPhone. Like, it's just so good. But in this shot, Samsung and Pixel had amazing lighting as well as color, and iPhone's was a bit dark. It was also slightly darker in this shot, but if you take a closer look at the trees towards the back, you'll notice Pixel does have a bit better lighting and color. iPhone was again very dark. Samsung here actually looked over-processed to me, and Pixel had the most natural coloring, detail, and lighting. And this was a pic I took of a massive painting. iPhone had some great detail, Samsung was a bit of a miss, and Pixel had the best color. Look, don't get me wrong, every single one of these phones take amazing raw shots that you can do a lot with, but the Pixel just consistently took amazing pics, so it's gotta win this round. So on average, around 900 films are shot in Paris every year, so we're better to do the cinematic test. And to really test the portrait video and cinematic mode, I wanted a busy road in the background to see how they had all coped. And the more you watch these three videos, the more you realize just how cinematic the iPhone's video looks. And there's just something about Samsung and Pixel that still look like they were taken on a smartphone. So I also tested this out with something that wasn't a person, like a boat. And although they all did a great job, what did surprise me was Pixel cannot actually shoot 4K cinematic video like Samsung and iPhone, so definitely a bummer there. At the end of the day, this test is about cinematic mode, and for me personally, the iPhone's does just look more cinematic, as though it was taken with a real camera and not on a smartphone. So I gotta give it the point. Now, for my macro test, we're looking at which phone can capture the most amount of detail that you can't normally see with the human eye. And what you also cannot see here is just how hard it was to actually shoot a macro pic with the iPhone. Like, both Samsung and Pixel were so much easier. In this pic, you also start to notice the radial blur from iPhone as well as Pixel, but Samsung managed to capture the most amount of detail in the entire image. And again, in this macro shot, it's actually a good example. You can see just how much more detail the Samsung was able to get, but towards the edges, the iPhone and Pixel just blurred. For me, this one is easy. I gotta give it to the Samsung because those macro shots were the easiest to take, and man, they just looked so crispy. So the big question with point and shoot is which one straight out the box without any change to settings can take the best normal photo and video. And in this first shot, as you guys can see, Samsung pretty much nailed it. Like, that's the type of picture you want to get of the Eiffel Tower. But the Samsung didn't always perform as good, especially in this test, where it's just oversaturated. The iPhone looks good, but the Pixel was the best. But then in this test, Pixel overexposed the sky, iPhones looked grungy, and Samsung's was good. So then I tested out the ultra-wide lens on all of them, and interestingly, the iPhone looked like it took the best shot. But it is worth mentioning that, remember, the iPhone's wide is now 48 megapixels, which, speaking of megapixels, I then had to test out their max resolution on each phone, and here the iPhone's 48 megapixel just looks so great. Samsung's 200 megs just didn't cut it, and Pixel's 50 megs was just a bit magenta. Moving on to video, iPhone just shoots the best video out the box. Both Samsung and Pixel got quite dark in the details, and here you can see more of what I mean. On the iPhone you can see detail in my pants, but on the other two it's just kind of lost. Oh yeah, and finally, remember you picked which one of these was your favorite? Well, now you can see which phone took which. Interesting. But I'm not gonna lie guys, this camera comparison was actually really tough because the iPhone, the Samsung, and the Pixel have never felt this similar before. But out the box, the phone that consistently took the best photos and videos has got to be the iPhone 16 Pro Max, making it the best smartphone camera in the world. But you guys let me know down in the comment section who you think should have won, and also don't forget to subscribe, but I'll see you guys in the next one. Toodles!